Hey guys, RLA Jack here for episode 3 of my MATLAB Basics series. And this uh, episode I'm going to be looking at some really simple functions that I think you guys should know in MATLAB. There's a little bit of subtlety based off like units and stuff. But these are, really the functions that take in numbers, output numbers. There's a lot more functions out there. Especially it gets interesting when you're working with matrices and figures and all that. It gets a lot more complex really fast. But these functions take in integers or numbers really, because floating point numbers, decimals, and they output decimals mostly. Okay, so first, just to clear off my stuff, I'm going to do that. Also, you can see I have all these variables cluttering up my workspace, so I'm going to use the clear command. Suddenly, they're all gone. And then CLC, because I don't like seeing that clear there. So I'm going to go into a few basic functions. So from last video, we did some cool stuff with adding numbers and statistics. So if I want to, remember I can just type stuff in this line and it will do it for me. If I want to use my really stupid function, add two nums, which just does what a plus sign should. 1 and 3. 4, you can always do 1 plus 3. Sure enough, that gives you the same answer, because that's what add two nums does in its guts. So we covered functions, but there are a lot of built-ins that I think you should know about. So I've already shown you min. Min just takes the minimum of two numbers. It was sort of what I chose to start off with because it also keeps some regard to sign too. It's what I started off with just because it is one of the simplest, easiest to understand functions that takes in multiple variables. It's the vast majority of what I'm going to talk about today. Pretty much everything new is going to take in just one variable and output just one output. So let's get started. So there's min, there's max, which does the same thing, except it picks the other number. Also, if you give it the same number, nothing breaks, still works the same. There's the exp command, which is just raising the cool constant e, that value. So if I do exp of 23, does e to the 23rd power. Now there is no value for e in MATLAB, so anytime you want to use e, that cool number that's 2.718281828, you can just do exp of 1, which is just e to the first power, and there it is. There's also the inverse of exp, which is log, which most of you know as ln. So if you do the log of exp of 1, which is the log of e, that's sort of 1 by definition, I suppose, because that's, these two functions are essentially inverses of each other. The log of 20 ends up being about 3. But this is your natural log. This is not what the log key on your calculator does. This is what the ln key does. If you want what the log key does, which is the base 10 logarithm, you can do log 10. So you want to do the base 10 logarithm of, 200, which is about 2.3. That would be how you would do it. And this you actually you'll end up not really using log or log 10, but they're useful. You can also put matrices of numbers into all of these functions, and it does basically the same thing, maybe with the exception of min and max, because these are just single input, single output. You can also do log of like negative numbers, and it will take care of complex arithmetic for you. Which thing with MATLAB is it's not just running this with doubles, which is just a decimal. It also is treating most things as complex too, or will allow for complex. Okay, you can do square root. You can find the square root of 2. Nice number. You can of course do your fundamental trig functions. So if you do the sine of pi, that'll give you something very close to 0. MATLAB doesn't have the numerical precision necessary to get anything smaller than 10 to the minus 16th, but for all intents and purposes, that's honestly okay, except for some very specific ones. It'll also, it's of course the input is in radians, so if you try like sine of 90 and you're expecting 1, you will be disappointed. You have to do sine of pi over 2 instead, which is the equivalent in radians of 90 degrees. Same goes for cosine, sin, cos, pi over 2, which is very close to 0. Again, this is the numerical precision of MATLAB that sort of breaks down here. There's also tangent, which is just tan, which it will not treat as infinity for some stupid reason. Also, if you're really a math nerd and you're into the hyperbolic functions, these do exist in MATLAB. You can take the hyperbolic cosine of 2 and you get that. And also you can do all this with complex numbers also. I should show you how to do complex numbers. So if you type in I, it will give you I, but you can also have variables named I. So if you now type in I, it won't give you I, it'll give you 40. Also, if you're an electrical engineer, if you type in J, yeah, it'll treat it as I, which, electrical engineers use MATLAB too. So if you do 1i, you will always get I. You can just type in complex numbers like 4 plus 3i, and you get stuff like that too. And you can also do like the hyperbolic cosine of 4 plus 3i, and a bunch of cool stuff with that. There's a square root function, which I already covered. Let's move on to sine. So if you use the sine function of some value, sign, it will give you the sine, which is 1, 0, or minus 1. If you find the sine is 0, it'll give you 0. If you find the sine of like a negative number, like negative 4, it'll give you negative 1. If you do the floor function, it will round towards negative infinity, so it'll round down. Like if you do the floor of 3.5, it'll round down to 3. If you do the floor of negative 3.5, it'll round down to negative 4, and so on. There's also ceiling, which is ceil of 3.5, which is 4. And then there's also round, which will round a decimal to the nearest integer. So if you round 3.5, rounding rules are you go up always. If you round negative 3.5, it also will go down if you're in the negative numbers for some odd rule that I'm never too clear on. But if you're dealing with things that aren't halves, it works exactly like you expect. So that'll also, will also be fun. I do wonder what happens when you pass complex numbers into it. And it turns out it just rounds to the nearest number of, real and imaginary part. Okay. So now I'm going to show you a few ways to generate random numbers in MATLAB. You can use the rand command, and it will just give you a random number between 0 and 1. Now, this isn't truly random for like hardcore stuff, since your computer is a deterministic machine. It ends up using some pseudo-random processes that, uses a seed and it like replugs in the number it got last to generate a new number and a new seed to start on, and so on and so forth. So it is deterministic. Like it's not like amazing, but it'll do for 210. But if you're doing like hardcore computational research, might not. There's randi, which does a similar thing, except it picks an integer up through the number that you pick. So if you do randi of 2, it'll give you an integer between 1 and 2. If you do randi of 1000, it will give you an integer between 1 and 1000. And it actually calls rand. So it's also pseudo-random. And of course there are many other functions that exist out there, and you can learn a lot about them on the internet. And in the next video I'm actually going to show you how to get the documentation you need on the internet. So I've sort of run through my entire list of basic functions to cover. There of course are some basic functions for matrices and stuff as well, but for that matter we should be good. Okay, in the next video I'm going to show you how to get help in MATLAB. But for now, I'm going to sign off.